Is Kirko really hurt?
This is the Atlanta Sports Party, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
To the Atlanta Sports Party, your home for the best Atlanta sports talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Maria Martin. The Atlanta Sports Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So Georgia showdown in Louisville this weekend went from competitive to cupcake, but we'll still have expectations. We'll talk about that. And the Braves, And Trey Young said if he had tall girl problems, of course, as a guy, he'd be the GOAT. We'll download. But first, is Kirko 100% or is he not? So obviously, this week there has been a lot of conversation centered around Kirk Cousins' health status after his debut performance for the Falcons last Sunday. Jarvis, in your humble opinion, is Kirk Cousins 100% healthy?
Yeah, he's healthy. Yeah, physically, yeah, he's healthy. Because here's why. Two reasons, right? Because there are two plays specifically that I looked at. I went back and looked at, and I said, you know what? I'm gonna look to see if he's hobbled, if he's stressing and straining throwing the football, or if his footwork is not quite right when he's throwing the football. That touchdown pass to Kyle Pitts, he was able to recognize pressure, roll out. He didn't look slow or anything like that, and he made a throw on the run that was right in the pocket where Kyle Pitts can catch the football. And second thing, it was one particular play where it was pressure, and it was a lot, trust me, and not just from TJ Watt. You know, those guys in the interior offensive line had their struggles, their fair share of struggles as well.
Yeah.
He felt the pressure, reset, stepped up in the pocket, and made a throw to Ray McLeod. So when you think about it from that standpoint, if a guy is physically injured, for me, I understand or feel that there's going to be a situation where you're looking at it and you're saying like he wouldn't be able to make those type of plays. Is my point.
Yeah.
So for me, I feel like he's 100% healthy now. Mentally, from a rust standpoint, that's a whole different conversation. But physical, I think Kirko is 100% ready to go.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, Jarvis, because of course there were comments immediately after that game Sunday and on into Monday where everyone felt like they had the need to weigh in. But what I listened to were most of the people who played the game and maybe experienced that particular Achilles injury. And the vast majority of them said, in their opinion, it wasn't so much his physical, even if he's like not 100%, even if he's maybe 90, 85%, it's really more mental because you just got to get through some progressions of that real, game time speed,
Live
that
football.
game time
Imagine that
action,
concept.
live, exactly, live football. And it's just everybody. And my mind also went to, and some even mentioned it, but my first thought was even like a Ronald Acuna Jr. I mean, we all talked about him coming back from his first major injury and how he didn't quite look like himself. But when he did, what did he become? The NL MVP. So yeah, I think there might be, you're onto something where a lot of guys who've experienced similar injuries where it's career threatening, it's season ending. It's more about your mental to get you back. But what about you, Maria, having seen him both at practice, in game action, heard all the commentary? What do you think about where Kirk Cousins is physically with his injury?
Yeah, I think Kirk is 100% healthy. I 100% believe that he is as good as he says he is. I think he feels good. And I think one thing that we need to mention is that all throughout training camp, he looked really healthy to me. And then in the game, he never favored his ankle. He never looked like it was bothering him. And he was pressured almost 40% of the time. And he never looked like he was in much duress in terms of his ankle. So Let's not forget he was getting banged around a pretty good bit on Sunday. And he never looked like he was hurt. Now, did he look comfortable in the game? That's completely different. And I think that goes back into, should guys play in the preseason? Should they not? Keep in mind, Kirk had not played in an NFL game, preseason or not, since October. That's a long time. Yeah. And it's not easy for quarterbacks to go into a new system, to go in there with a first-time play caller and a new offense and just poof, make it all work. It doesn't work like that. Now, if we don't see anything progress by, say, week 4, then there's a little bit of cause for concern. But I thought that Kirk did some good things things. I know certainly he'll want a lot back, and definitely that final interception that he threw, I'm sure he would have rather taken the sack there when he's looking at film. And we're going to get to talk to Kirk today, so we'll see what he says. But, I think that he's 100% healthy. I do believe in that. And I also think that there were a lot of opinions out there. The way that Zac Robinson called the play was favorable to Kirk's health or not health. I just don't think that's very accurate, because shotgun and pistol, where your running back lines up, has nothing to do with the quarterback's mobility. And I want people to understand that. So, correct. And a lot of, and this is just a guess by me. This is not validated or anything yet, but I think not putting him under center a lot is just trying to keep him away from the edge guys as much as possible. Jarvis also mentioned it. The interior defensive line for the Steelers, they played exceptionally well. So forget TJ Watt, because he's one of one. We know he's in the same breath as Aaron Donald. Sure. But the interior defensive line also gave him a lot of issues throughout the day. Let's give the Steelers defense a lot of credit. Yeah. So this was week 1. The Steelers are no slouch. It's a tough opponent to go against in your first game back since October. Again, first-time play caller in Zac Robinson. I think the panic is warranted for Falcons fans, just in the sense that they've seen so much bad quarterback play over the last couple of years. It's easy to panic, but I don't want people to panic yet. Let's keep it what Aaron Rodgers said 10 years ago, RELAX. Relax, everybody.
Yeah. And I too, you make an excellent point. When you're looking at not just JJ Watt, you're looking at Cam Hayward, you're looking at Keanu Benton, and you're looking at also a secondary that's going to be in your face too, because they're a secondary in the Steelers, kind of similar to the Eagles secondary as well. They like to get after it as far as tackling and being that sort of second level of going after the quarterback. So there was a lot more to think about than just TJ Watt. There was a lot. And of course, we'll talk a little bit about what was going on the O-line for the Falcons. So there's that. Sometimes we're thinking about the quarterback and whether or not Zac Robinson is trying to hide any maladies or any ills for your quarterback. You never know what he was trying to hide for that offensive line, but we'll get to that in a second. But speaking of Zac Robinson, obviously, Maria, he was the other individual who took the most heat this past weekend and earlier in this week about the play calling it vanilla. Obviously, everyone questioning why Kirk Cousins was in shotgun 22 times when the most he'd ever been in shotgun in a game in his career was 10. And that's not kind of speaking to his strengths. But what were your thoughts about Zac Robinson's play calling? And I think you also made a great point as well. It's only week 1, so maybe we take a step back and give Zac Robinson, a new play caller dealing with a new offense and a whole new set of players, a little bit of a break too.
I know people don't want to hear this, but it's really hard to call a game offensively, okay? And when you're doing it for the very first time in the NFL against a Pittsburgh Steelers defense, I guarantee you a large majority of what you saw was just indicative of what they thought that the Steelers defense was going to present. And they had a lot of issues. They gave them so many issues. Who knows? Zac could have had a ton of really creative things on his call sheet, but when you're getting ripped to shreds on the edge, you're not going to get to that point in your call sheet. You're just not. And let's hope that this is the worst game that he ever calls in his career. It's hard. He's going to get better. And I fully anticipate him to come out and say, look, I did some things wrong and there were some things I could have done differently. We all know that that could be true. And this is all a learning experience for him. And I also just don't think that Kirk being lined up in the shotgun minimally before he got to Atlanta has anything to do with the way that Zac called the game. Everybody calls a game differently, and Zac's going to call it a lot differently than the next offensive coordinator and the next offensive coordinator. And remember that Zac is really young. He's only 37 years old. So he's coming from a different style of offense. Now, yes, no play action is a little bit of a head scratcher. I know that a lot of people would have liked to see that clearly, but all of these things that you listed out to you and all of the things that you did are well documented. That means there's a lot of tendency that was shown for the Falcons offense. You're not going to see that on Monday night in Philadelphia. That will be out the window. They will have a new offensive plan because in the NFL, you can't show tendency. It's going to get exploited. And TJ Watt was clearly all over it all Sunday night. So I think that it's just going to get better for Z-Rob. You know, it only can, right? And even at Oklahoma State, by the way, he almost never played under center. It was very rare that you saw him there. So it's not like these things are correlated. It's just him trying to figure out what works for him, what works for Kirk, what works for, as you mentioned, this offensive line who clearly had issues. So it's a learning process. They're going to have to learn really quickly. But I do think that Zac's going to get better because why couldn't he? He's got a veteran quarterback. There's tons of weapons. And let's not forget, I know people don't want to talk about the fact that there were some good things on offense. Opening drive showed you they can score, okay? And that was a really nice offensive drive. And then the 2-minute offense before the half, Those are the two drives that stuck out to me that you build upon. And look, at the end of the day, they had a chance to win that ball game with a couple of minutes left to play.
Yeah, I think, Jarvis, the biggest thing is, and I'll let you weigh in so we can wrap up, but I think the biggest thing is, will he or will he not learn from his mistakes? Because unfortunately, and I hear you, Maria, but unfortunately, we shouldn't only be able to point to one or two things in a game that were like almost sandwiched beginning and end, or beginning and middle, as far as our evaluation of what went well. So I'm hoping what he does learn is that one of the biggest things is you have to learn how to be an elite play caller and make adjustments at halftime, because man, the Steelers were like, oh, we saw A, B, C, and D. Oh, we're going to rip this to shreds in the second half, which is why you didn't score any points. So that's something obviously Terrell Austin knows how to do, and on some level, Arthur Smith knew how to do to be able to close the game out. So I agree with you. I certainly think it's going to change, but it's going to have to. And
It pains you to give Arthur Smith credit to you. I could tell. It just pains you to give him some credit. Yeah. But for me, I feel like there are a couple of things in this game that I feel like went down, and there's two reasons why they lost this game. I feel like number one, I feel like Zac Robinson was obvious, right? When they were in the pistol, they were going to turn around and hand that bad boy off. And I'm talking about same looks too. I'm talking about motioning to the play side. You saw Charlie Warner. He was doing it in the game most of the time when they were running the football. So it's just, you can't get like Maria mentioned, you can't show tendencies like that, especially that quickly within the game, because once those linebackers recognized it, you had the safety walking down in the box. He had 8 men in the box, first, second, third. I was just like, hey man, you got to do something, dog. Plug it in, plug it out, and throw it over the top, man. Like that's just football 101. And then I think on the second part of that, I feel like there was an execution issue as well. Because remember that screen to Bijan Robinson down there in the red zone? If Drake London holds onto his man, not hold, but like physically just get between him and Bijan Robinson, that's a touchdown.
Yeah.
Another point, Kyle Pitts, if he had held onto Minkah Fitzpatrick on one particular play, I'm talking about Bijan Robinson still would have been running. It's just little things here and there where all 11 aren't on the same page. Yeah. Somebody make a mistake. I'm telling you, it comes down to an execution of an offensive play. One person can mess it up. Everybody else can be doing their job, and one person can mess it up. And we saw that consistently. It was actually kind of sloppy if you really think about it. And when you talk about being sloppy in the first week of the season, I think Matt Ryan said it himself. He's like, hey, man, offenses need to get into a rhythm, and you work that stuff out before the season starts.
Yeah.
And those self-inflicted penalties that you're talking about move the chains back. And third and long is so hard to come back from it as an offense. So they need to clean up the minor things. And I think that we'll see some improvements on Monday night in Philly.
Yeah, because 2-9 on third down won't cut it in the league. Georgia Showdown and this weekend went from competitive to cupcake. We will have still expectations for them, however, and we'll talk about that in the deep dive. This episode of our Atlanta Sports Party is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Now, a couple of cool things about Game Time Picks. Well, curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. So basically what that means is if you're someone who loves to watch sports, for example, maybe you want to travel up to Philly and give the Falcons some support, but you want to get these last minute tickets, or maybe you're looking for a cool concert to check out or last minute comedy show, Game Time Picks can actually get all of that for you with an easy click, because they have panoramic seat views where you can view the seat from your app before you buy. And of course, the lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Now, there's a Game Time ticket coverage as well, where your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms do apply, but create that account, redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. So what time is it? It's game time. All right, Maria, the Georgia Bulldogs open SEC play on the road at Kentucky Saturday. What's your expectations for the Dogs in this game?
Look, I know that the Dogs are a very big favorite in this one, and they should be. Kentucky had a really ugly game against South Carolina, but I do expect Kentucky to bounce back to some degree. Now, Georgia, pretty much across the board, I think is better than Kentucky, but something is weird about this matchup. I mean, they always tend to be a tough opponent against one another, but Kentucky's play was just garbage. I mean, they had 6 points, they gave up 5 sacks, they had 44 yards passing. There was not a lot to show for that. And even though this is a quarterback that used to be in Georgia's system, Georgia certainly has their notes on Brock Vandagriff. He was there for quite some time, and is a local Atlanta area kid too, played at Prince Avenue Christian. But yeah, I expect a fight. I just definitely expect Georgia to win.
Yeah, I would think the same. And it's interesting, Maria, that you mentioned Brock Vandagriff, because a lot of people are saying, oh, well, Kentucky looked really horrible last weekend. But hey, you've got Brock Vandagriff with a little revenge factor. You've got Jamon Dumas Johnson with a little revenge factor. So maybe that'll help Kentucky to look a little bit more like they do against the Dogs. Because, of course, Jarvis, when Georgia plays Kentucky in Athens, average 26-point win margin. They play them in just an average 10-point win margin. But that said, what are your expectations for these Dogs this Saturday?
Yeah, to be honest with you, is to get it over with, because here's the thing: Kentucky had struggles throwing the football. They had Brock in there, they had the backup quarterback coming in, and he was doing nothing but running. So I feel like they're going to try to figure out a way to run the football and try to conjure up some offense. So I feel like Georgia's going to have to load up on that run game and end this bad boy like it should be, because when you think about what these type of games beginning SEC play, of course you have to respect it that, hey, Mark Stoops will figure out some game plan to try to make this thing somewhat close. So I look for them to try to ground and pound that bad boy, regardless if they're having success with it. And Georgia's just going to have to be ready to bow up and get the ball, make them continue to put in the football and give their offense opportunity to score.
Yeah, Maria, we talked about this earlier in the week on the Dogs Party, like the motivation that Kirby Smart was going to use on each side of the ball. So obviously we were thinking on the offensive side of the ball, hey, you guys, it was the second week in a row that you didn't quite execute that 2-minute offense to perfection. You had 45 seconds in the game against Tennessee Tech. Halftime, didn't score. Of course, didn't score against Clemson. I'm sure that's going to be one, challenge there. And of course, the defense probably challenging themselves. Hey, you had a chance to get a goose egg a second week in a row and you kind of didn't. But what are your thoughts on where he might also use some motivation on both his offensive and defensive sides of the ball?
Well, I think one thing that needs to be mentioned is that we talk about how big of a favorite Georgia is. He's very good about saying, who cares? Like, it doesn't matter. Look at what's happened every time we've gone to Lexington. And you mentioned it. It happens to be a lot closer than normal. So I think for him, it's let's use that as motivation. The fact that everybody thinks that you could either just blow them out, we don't know that that's going to happen. Take that out of the picture. Use this as an opportunity to not only prove a point, but to make a statement. And of course, you want to almost play to perfection. It's impossible in football to play perfect, but to play for perfection is kind of what Kirby is always striving for, and never to really lose a step against your former teammates. I mean, I don't know that a lot of them really care about that, but certainly he's going to send that as a message, in a day and a time where a lot of kids will transfer if they're not getting the playing time. Why don't we send a message where, hey, you could still be winning on this side. Is that really worth it for you? You let me know.
And to kind of continue the let's get this game over with theme, I feel like there was one particular drive, actually the opening drive for the Bulldogs last week, where Anthony Evans had to return, and and then they set up the offense, a quick score. I feel like Kirby is going to emphasize this special teams, because I feel like special teams is what's going to get you through when you go ahead down to Tuscaloosa on the 28th. So I feel like there are going to be moments within this game. There are going to be teaching moments to say, hey, man, this is what we need to do in order to – we got this win. Here's what we need to do down the road when we go into Tuscaloosa, when we go into Austin, to go face Sarkisian and friends. So all of those things that are going to happen in this game, I feel like Kirby's going to pull them out in game and after game and say, hey, this is the moment where I need you to do X, Y, Z, because we're going to need you when crunch time comes, especially with all these tough road games that we have this year.
Now, Maria, opening SEC play also means that Kirby Smart had to give an injury report Wednesday. Michael Williams, of course, is doubtful, but probably will be out. Same for Roger Robinson. He's actually officially listed as out. Jordan Hall, Xavier McLeod, Warren Brinson, all questionable. Now, granted, no surprises, but the Big Ten last year was the first to require injury reporting. Mid-American Conference last week also required it. So do you see that requirement to officially report injuries as maybe something that'll be adopted across conferences and across all of college sports eventually?
God, Kirby hated that, didn't he? Man, that was my first thought, was like, oh, I really got to actually put it out there. No, he's pretty good about at least telling you that someone's got something going on, but to actually put it on paper, I'm sure is something that Nick Saban's like, thank God I'm gone. No, I actually do think it's going to be implemented. Each year, college football is taking a step closer to becoming the NFL. You're seeing this in-helmet communication. Exactly. You see the 2-minute. I mean, all of these things, it's slowly but surely becoming a professional league. You're paying players now. They can transfer, as in get traded, kind of. There's not really a similarity, but you get what I'm saying. There's a lot of instances where they are becoming a professional league, and this is another step to that. And so I think that you're going to see that probably within the next few years, that it's implemented college football wide.
And to your point, Maria, 90 minutes before kickoff is when the final injury designations are due, right? Sounds familiar? Right. And I just chuckled to myself when I was reading what Greg Sankey's initial comments about it, where he was like, yeah, we want to make sure third-party entities are aware of what's going on. Wait a minute. What? Oh, so all the betting websites,
third-party entities
off of these youngsters, you want to make sure they got all the information they need so they can make the right decision. What is going on here? What are we doing? Hey, look, I got to do nothing but respect it, because hey, the more people, FanDuel, who's an excellent sponsor of this Locked On network as a whole, hey, if you can help them out, hey, the more, the better. I'm cool with it, because, hey, everybody getting paid now. Now the kids getting their money.
Yes.
All the admins getting their money and coaches getting their money. Everybody getting paid. So, hey, let's just figure this thing out so we can continue to watch some good football.
Yeah. But other than maybe a little bit of whiffing on Kirby's part, like, I want to give this injury report, doesn't this all really still play into his hands and play to his advantage? Because he's really had that program set up. Remember the comments he made the last couple of days about how NFL scouts come out and say that Georgia's program is one of the most, they have their players to be game ready, NFL ready. All of these things play in to getting your players NFL ready. So none of this is new to this Georgia program. It may be officially new, but there are so many nuances, Maria, JD, that he's been doing for the last several years, gearing up for what he knew was coming.
I think football, it's the NFL.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I literally was about to say, you can just forget all the amateurism that we used to love about college football. Now, granted, there's a lot of really good things with what's happening in college football right now. I'm a firm believer that players should get paid and all that good stuff, but it's not what it used to be. I just think that the only annoying thing for Kirby is that you have to actually tell the world who's hurt. But yes, it is proven time in and time out that the Dogs have just been ready to go play in the NFL, and it's a seamless transition for them, or as seamless as it can be. Playing in the NFL is very difficult, and I think people forget that all the time. But we're getting ready to see a lot of those former Dogs up in Philly for Monday Night Football, so Kirby gets those guys ready to go. I just don't know if he loves the injury report.
Yes. Anything he can do to have just a little bit of a hand up, he wants to keep, right?
Sure.
Well, we always want the Braves to have a hand up, but not so much sometimes this season, even like last night. And Trey Young said if he had tall girl problems as a guy, he'd be the GOAT. Well, we're going to download on it and around the Metro. Locked On Sports Today is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the noise. Locked On Sports Today also brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Maria, this was one of those weeks where the Braves are going to brave. We love to talk about the Mets going to Met, but the Braves going to brave as far as the 2024 Braves, wherein we saw what happened to them Monday, where they took an L to the Reds because they couldn't score. And then Tuesday, they scored so many runs that we were like, no, can you just harness some of them and hold them for Wednesday? All they needed to harness was a couple of runs from Tuesday to get a win Wednesday. Couldn't get it done. And of course, they remain just mired behind the Mets in the race for the final wild card spot. So for you, when you look at the fact that they have 16 games left in this season to try to make a move into the playoffs, do they get there? Do they not? And when I say, or do you not care either way, I don't mean it in a negative way. I just mean, have you gotten to the point in place where you're like, whatever happens, I'm good with it?
It's not that I don't care. It's just that if the Braves do sneak in there, which I think is a very real possibility, I don't know how sustainable that is in the postseason. Just to be realistic, they are getting hurt every time we turn around. And if you would have told me that it would have come down to the Mets and the Braves in a wild card spot at the end of the year, I would have told you were crazy. This was on paper one of the best, if not the best teams heading into baseball season. And then they've just had a lot of injuries that have really dictated the way that their season has gone. And it's unfortunate. It's a part of the game, but it has just been overwhelming for this team. And I think, honestly, a little bit too much to overcome in terms of the longevity of the postseason. We've seen funky things happen, and we saw a Braves team who shouldn't have won a World Series win it. So anything can happen, but there's not a lot of hope there simply because every time you turn around, you got Raylo getting hurt now. I think the good thing that plays into the Braves' favor right now is the remaining schedule's not that bad. They run into the Dodgers, obviously, but at the same time, the Mets are playing the Phillies. So they're each playing really tough opponents at the same time. But then I think the season is going to come down to that Mets and Braves series before the end of the year is over. So if they do squeak in there, which again, very possible, I don't really know how long they're going to last in the postseason this year.
Yeah, and it was a tough situation because when you look at September and even now, to your point, Maria, odds are that betting odds, if you will, are still saying that the Braves have the easier strength of schedule versus the Mets. So they still then have the quote unquote best odds. But this was kind of like a perfect storm, Jarvis, where the Padres were looking like they were left for dead. The Diamondbacks looked like it was a fluke from last year. And then the Mets looked like they were going to Met. And then all of a sudden, the back half of the season after the All-Star break happened, and all three of these teams caught fire. And unfortunately for the Braves, they seemed like they caught a case at every position known to man. And so now here we are. So, I mean, where do you think, do you see them as legitimately getting into the postseason? I agree with Maria, not going far, but can they sneak in?
I believe they have the ability to sneak in. I know we talked about on the baseball party where I don't know, but last night it just kind of had a sobering moment because if you look at what Marcell Ozuna has been able to do in the month of September, it's not been good. And we know that he's been the one constant in this lineup throughout the entire season. That still feels weird to say to me out loud. But I feel like when you have guys like that who've been doing what they're supposed to do, who've been coming through with runners in scoring position. We saw that in the 7th and 8th inning last night against the Nationals. Like, man, what are y'all doing? Y'all had opportunities to get in this game, and you just wasn't able to do it. And Sean Murphy has been awful this year. He has just not been himself. And when you combine all of those things together, and then you have compound that with Reynaldo Lopez going on the 15-day IL or whatever, and you just get to a point where it's just like, all right, man, like we just can't go call up somebody and say, oh yeah, come over here and just start hitting the ball out the park, for the last 17 or 18 games, and then help us go on a streak to go win the World Series. I just don't think that's going to happen. And I'm at the point now where it's just like, it is what it is. That's where I'm at with the Braves right at this point.
One thing that I just don't want to be lost on anyone is the season that Chris Sale has had. And I don't want what's happened to everyone else around him really take away from that. I mean, I literally threw my pen because I'm so passionate about this topic. He's comeback player of the year. He's just had such an unbelievable ride. And as long as Braves fans are going to be frustrated about the season, and it's warranted and rightfully so, just remember that Chris Sale did something that nobody expected. And it's truly been a joy to watch.
Yeah, the one person you thought and you were afraid would end up on the IL for extended periods of time and might not finish the season is the one who, other than Marcelo Ozuna, has been keeping this team afloat. Now, someone who believes that he could keep a team afloat if only he was a little bit taller, like that old song used to say. But let me preface by saying this. I'm not throwing shade just to throw shade. I am 5'11", so I get to say tall girl problems, right?
You're 5'11"?
On a bad day. Good day.
On a good bad day. Wait, no, anyway, continue. I'm sorry. I correct you all the time, but that's tall.
Yeah,
Anyway.
so I needed to caveat that for anybody who's listening and not viewing. Like, yeah, I'm tall, so I can say things like this. Trey Young said, if I was 6'8", I feel like I would be the best player ever to play this game. Of course, that was tweeted out NBA Central on X. Now, does Trey really have a point, guys? Or maybe it's one of those things where in order to avoid commentary on top of your commentary, maybe you just keep calm, keep quiet, and wait for the season to start. Just a thought.
Go ahead, Jarvis.
Go.
Hey, look, I'm gonna say this. I know y'all probably gonna look at me crazy, but if Trae Young was 6'8", he'll be Luka Doncic. That's exactly what he'll be. When you're talking about from a vision, passing the ball, and having their fair share of issues, Luka is not perfect. The dude showed up one day on 1 year for camp, and he looked like he was eating McDonald's all summer. So when you think about just having issues, not necessarily being the most team guy, or is he going to share the basketball, or is he willing to share the rock? You know, because think about when they brought Kyrie Irving in. It was the same thing. It was the same narrative where we talk about DeJounte Murray and Trey. So I feel like because NBA it's a wing league, right? 6'8" or better. That's the only way you're gonna be considered one of the best players in the NBA. So I feel like
this game.
Yeah, in this game, in today's game, yes, absolutely, 1,000%. I just feel like I feel like he has a point. He has a point. I'm not saying that he would be the best player ever. I'm not gonna go that far, but I would say if he was 6'8", he'll be Luka.
Yeah, because Luka's 6'7", if we're being honest about it. And yeah, if you were Trey's height 10, 20 years ago, Isaiah Thomas comes to mind, then yeah, it'd be a different story. But this is a league, like you said, where I mean, Kevin Durant is like the prototype of what you look for in a player. Right, exactly. Exactly. So yeah, I mean, I get his point too, but I'm just like, I just think that kind of commentary, you know, as a tall girl, like, you know, I try to keep quiet about my commentary. I just try to keep that commentary to myself. But Maria, you say what? Before we wrap up, leave us on a good note.
Okay, well, look, I'm kind of with you. I think Trey has a point, although I just think he took it a little too far in saying that he'd be the best player ever. But also, like, why are you telling people you'd be better if you were tall? Like, that doesn't feel like something we should be admitting, you know? And yes, clearly his height would help him out. That's very obvious. But why don't you just be what you think you are at the height you are? So I don't know. I just think it's another comment to get people riled up about Trey. And at this point, it's like, let's just see what happens during the season.
It feeds the detractors. Like,
right.
Exactly.
That's all it
I'm
is.
thinking too, like, my goodness. And you sound like the guy in the song that we were just singing where he was complaining about.
I wish I was a little bit taller.
Girl, you sound like that to most people who are already your detractors and they want an opportunity to literally, like, to take you down. You're giving them more fodder. I'm like, come on, man, let's just keep quiet. Let your game do your game. Let do your thing. And we can all just kind of live a better tall or not so tall life. Thanks to everyone who are everydayers for making the Atlanta Sports Party your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked On Hawks for your second listen. And be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll also be available wherever you download your podcast. We'll see you on the Atlanta Football Party Monday.